Happy hump day to you, Central Georgia. Thanks for tuning in here for a look at your extended forecast. We have some more widespread rain chances on their way over the next couple of hours, so we'll break down what the timing of that rain is looking like, how long the cloudy skies stick around in the forecast, and then what your forecast is shaping up for as we head into Halloween on Friday. So let's go ahead and talk about maybe some rainfall first and foremost. Taking a look at our October rainfall graphic, if the graphics will advance for me. They were acting up this morning, so maybe just give it a minute to refresh and kind of get itself together. No, maybe not. We're going to just step off the screen really quick and take a look at our rainfall graphic. If I can get it to pop up here, see if that's going to work. And there we go. So here's our October rainfall graphic. We didn't record any rain yesterday here in Central Georgia, so that put us a little bit of a notch down farther into the dry category. If we did record any rain, it was just a minuscule mist or sprinkle shower, just what we simply call about a trace of rain. That is just a few droplets of rain that are not even enough to account for 1/100th of an inch of rain. So only 4 days in the entire month of October thus far that we've recorded rain. However, today is looking to make 5 days in the month of October. But on Monday, we did get our fair share of rain, at least compared to most of these values that you see. Over 3/4 of an inch of rain on the 27th. So our total over an inch and about 1/4 of an inch, 1.35 inches is what we've received in the form of rainfall so far in the entire month. Still around an inch below what we see on average in the month of October. Maybe some totals today will add about 1/10 or 2 of an inch to this total that we do see, but it doesn't look like we're going to hit average, and obviously nowhere near our record of 9.39 inches set back in 1959. So let's talk about your headlines. Gloomy and dreary once again for today. Many of you have probably already noticed it if you've taken a look outside. No real peaks of sunshine. You do have those very, very light rain showers and just a messy atmosphere, and along with that, some chilly temperatures. We're still going to remain mostly cloudy as we head into tomorrow, but the latest run of Future View is looking a bit more promising. We'll talk about what that has to say. And then Halloween looking scary good here in Central Georgia, but it's also going to be quite chilly and quite crisp, especially for the evening and nighttime hours when many of you are probably planning a lot of your Halloween activities. So here's a look around the quad. No breaks in sunshine, just a whole lot of gray in Warner Robins, Georgia National Fairgrounds down in Houston County, downtown Dublin, and up here in downtown Macon. So it's kind of been a combination of lower level cloud cover and some upper level cloud cover that is building in from the west. Temperature-wise, we have seen a steady increase in these temperature values, somewhere in the low 50s to the mid 50s. Everyone's temperature this morning was quite literally at 50, 51, or 52 degrees. We did have a 49 up in Monticello, and then I think we had a 53 down in Rochelle, so maybe about a degree or two of an increase in those temperature values as we continue to go into this late morning time period. But the eastern United States, the dreary weather does exist almost everywhere. Take a look at your areas that are normally somewhere in the upper 70s or the 80s, like New Orleans, Houston, over to Panama City. Those temperatures are in the low to mid 60s. So 71 is our warmest temperature right now. And that's all the way down in Orlando, where the southern tip of the Florida Peninsula still is holding on to a bit more of a humid atmosphere. And over here to the west, it is mighty, mighty chilly. 39 in Amarillo, 33 degrees over in Denver. Now those areas farther to the west, they do get the sunrise just a tad bit later than us. However, these numbers are definitely still pretty cool for this time. And we continue to see widespread 40s and 50s to the immediate north of us. But take a look at these wind arrows right here. This circulation right here on the corner of Missouri, Arkansas, and getting over into western Tennessee, maybe southwestern Kentucky. This is where a center of low pressure is continuing to move across the United States. And we'll talk about what implications that has to our forecast. The center of low pressure, not exactly today. It's more so going to be the cold front to the south of it that sends us our rain today. But as we go into tomorrow, that center of low pressure is still going to have some impacts to our forecast. So your dew point temperatures, maybe a slight increase thus far. We're not looking at these numbers to be somewhere really too far above the 60s throughout today, but we could look at some light green to build back into the forecast as this front does clash up against any remaining moisture that we have in the forecast. And you can pick apart where this frontal boundary is by the wind arrows that continue to come up from the south and the southeast to the east of this frontal boundary, but they continue to come out of the west behind the actual front. And there's plenty of dry air back over into Mississippi, western Alabama, but there still is a little bit of humidity to work with, say in central Alabama, and eventually that humidity will make its way over into central Georgia throughout the rest of today. And speaking of your winds and your wind gusts, starting to build in and starting to be pretty gusty out of the south and the southeast. Up here in Macon, a 20-mile-per-hour gust just reported. Sustained winds anywhere kind of in those upper 10s value, or not upper 10s, I guess I should say, around 7 or 8, maybe even 9 miles per hour, 13-mile-per-hour breeze down in Warner Robins. But gustier winds are present the farther west that you go. So as you get closer and closer to the frontal boundary itself, that is going to continue to have that west to east motion throughout today, and that's going to propel some of those shades of yellow, maybe even some pockets of some orange and red all across central Georgia throughout the afternoon. So let's talk about some numbers. First and foremost, 58 for a high temperature yesterday. That's exactly what we had forecasted. It was once again another very chilly afternoon, but it was a slightly warmer morning once again with the widespread cloud cover. 2 degrees above average of where we should be at 48 degrees this time of year, and 17 degrees below our average high of 75 degrees this time of year. So now taking a look at your records, 89 back in 1984, at least that number is not above the 90-degree mark, and your record low, 27 degrees back in 2001. Boy, is that chilly. If you thought this morning was chilly, take off about 25 degrees from that temperature value, then obviously it's a very, very substantially cold morning and way too premature to see those temperatures. But that's why those are records. Those are kind of the outliers in terms of your morning low temperatures all time. We didn't record any rain like we were mentioning. Your departure of rain went down just a little bit to 2.85 inches above where we should be in 2025 as a whole. So right there above 2 3/4 of an inch and still pretty close to the 3-inch mark. A pretty good cushion to undergo another dry spell, but it actually doesn't look like it's going to be a fairly dry spell over the course of the next 7 days, but we will get some drier weather as we head into the beginning of the weekend. We haven't been able to see the sunrise or the sunset the past 2 days in central Georgia, so 7:49 was when the sun rose yesterday. 6:47 is when it set. I know I, for one, am definitely noticing these earlier sunsets. It's starting to be dark by the time I'm crawling into bed and getting to bed around 7 p.m. each and every night to wake up super, super dark and early each and every morning. But that is all going to change as we head into this weekend. We'll break down that in a little more detail coming up. So hour by hour, your temperatures in the upper 50s, maybe actually seeing the 60-degree mark today for a change. That would be a pleasant sight to see. And obviously, if we have to talk about 60 degrees being on the warmer side, which compared to Monday and yesterday, it definitely would be. It is still going to be a pretty chilly atmosphere. Remember that average high, 75 degrees this time of year. And what I forecasted was 63 for a high temperature today. That's going to be what I like to refer to as a middle ground high temperature. Areas farther up to the north of Macon, those areas are probably not going to crawl out of the upper 50s throughout today. But areas farther to the south of Macon, as you get into areas like Pulaski County, Dooley County, down to Wilcox County, those areas could actually see the mid to upper 60s as they are anticipating seeing maybe a few glimpses of the sunshine, the first we've seen in about 48 hours. And that could result in a slight warm up in those numbers, but also it's all going to be dependent on the humidity. So those dew point temperatures are going to rise ahead of that humidity that is kind of riding the front edge of that frontal boundary. And as the dew point temperatures increase, your temperatures will also increase because you can't have temperatures that are below your actual dew point temperatures. That's when you get over 100% relative humidity, and you can't have that. Your relative humidity does only get up to 100%. So the humidity, a big reason for a slightly warmer afternoon, but like I mentioned, 63, that is still 12 degrees below average for this time of year. But your main headlines as we head throughout the rest of your Wednesday is the front arriving this afternoon, so going to create a pretty breezy atmosphere with plenty of widespread showers. And those showers mainly in the light to kind of steady range, but some pockets of some heavier rain could be embedded and enveloped within this frontal boundary that passes through. Southeast breeze 5 to 15 miles per hour. After the front passes through, those winds are going to start to shift direction. They're going to start to come in from the west, but not going to be terribly gusty after the passage of the boundary, at least today. But as we go into tomorrow, it is looking to be a pretty windy day, and those gusts are going to be widespread. So the occasional gust up to 25 miles per hour is going to be possible with the actual passage of the front. But first things first, let's talk about your satellite and radar. Continuing to show widespread cloud cover, maybe some spots where the clouds aren't necessarily as dense and as thick in nature in areas like Putnam County, Baldwin, down to Jones, Wilkinson, and Twiggs counties. But we also have some rain to talk about already this morning. If you caught the morning show, I was telling you about the rest of the morning time frame into around lunchtime. We could have a few spotty showers, maybe a few spotty sprinkles present, and that's mainly going to be greater farther over to the west. Well, that looks to be what's coming to fruition. Some light sprinkles around Butler and Taylor County, stretching over into western Crawford County, scattered about Upson County, and all the way through areas like Spalding and Pike counties, making their way over to the I-75 corridor, just to the north of Forsyth and maybe even eventually Monroe County. Pretty good cluster of rain right here to the east of Columbus. Some pockets of yellow, maybe even some faint areas of orange, which are going to indicate your heavier rainfall rates, but this isn't necessarily associated with anything in the way of thunderstorms. We don't see anything in the way of flashes of lightning whatsoever. So this is kind of the beginning of the front, continuing to push over to the east. Like I mentioned, it is back over into Alabama right now, so we'll see better organization directly ahead of the boundary. But take a look at this circulation, that counterclockwise rotation. This is a pretty well-defined low pressure center up there in western Tennessee, maybe into portions of the corner of Missouri, Arkansas, and getting back into Kentucky. But more widespread rain is present closer to the center of that low pressure, and you can see that there is a brief moment of clearing behind this frontal boundary, but we're pretty close to the center of this low pressure, so we're actually going to have wraparound circulation with this low that does pass us just to the north, and that is what's going to kind of set up our forecast as we head into tomorrow. So here's a look at your surface map. We have a bit of an occluded front, which just means that this cold front right here has caught up to a bit of a warm front that was ahead of it. Nonetheless, this is creating that widespread rain that you see down to the south of that low pressure center. So as this low continues to move to the east, this frontal boundary will also continue to move over to the east, and it looks like actually the front moving at a bit of a quicker speed than the low pressure center itself. So if we can see that frontal boundary continue to go ahead of the low pressure center, that is also going to be a good reason why we do get some cloud cover and maybe a few shower chances as we go into tomorrow afternoon. But let's jump into future view. I did mention maybe some spots of clearing the farther south that you live throughout today. Consider yourself very lucky if you actually get to glimpse the sunshine before we start to set up another dreary atmosphere here in central Georgia. So I do believe a couple of scattered showers, maybe even more so a sprinkle, still going to be present across areas of west central Georgia and northwest central Georgia as we go throughout the next few hours. But it's really around 3 o'clock that the bulk of the rain ahead of the frontal boundary starts to move in. Now, just given what I saw in the satellite and radar imagery, this may be trailing a bit behind the actual passage of this front. I have been saying around 2 to 3 o'clock is when the entrance of that rain is going to occur in our westernmost counties. So I would maybe push the timing of this up an hour as of right now. Let's go ahead and flash forward right around 5 p.m. evening commute time, as many of you are getting off of work, going to pick up your kids from daycare, going to pick up your kids from after school activities. Still widespread rain and starting to move into areas like Houston County, Bibb County up here, getting into Monroe County. So it's going to be a messy atmosphere along the I-75 corridor right there around evening commute time. But this front will continue to move to the east fairly quickly. And when I say that it's going to be a messy atmosphere, it's more than likely still going to be for around that 30 to 45 minute range. This is going to be some pretty short-lived rain and mainly of the green category. So just some steady showers, some pockets where the rain is a little bit heavier than others, but starting to approach areas like Dublin, getting up into Milledgeville, Hancock, Washington counties, down into Dodge County, right around the 6 p.m. hour, and then we progress into 7 and 8 o'clock. This frontal boundary is finally exiting stage right, and we're actually able to maybe get a glimpse of the sunset. I think the farther west that you live, you'll have a better image of that sunset as you start to get some clearing behind this frontal boundary. This at 8 p.m., it is already going to be well dark by then. The sunset is happening just probably about 10 minutes past 6:30 each and every evening. So when the rain finally gets out of here, it will be a dark atmosphere in central Georgia. So I imagine a lot of that water still will be remain standing at the surface as you walk out the door on Thursday morning. So we try to have some clouds in the forecast as you walk out the door tomorrow morning, but pretty good clearing over to the east. So it does look like the sunrise should at least be viewable as you walk outside on Thursday, something to maybe put you in a bit of a better mood as opposed to the very cloudy and messy atmosphere and some chilly temperatures. But the temperatures are going to be chilly. In fact, even more chilly tomorrow morning as opposed to what we've seen over the last couple of days. But hopefully the more and more sunshine that we get, it will start to dry out the roads, dry out the sidewalks, just make it a bit more of a pleasant atmosphere to walk outside to. And if we can hold on to some glimpses of sunshine into the afternoon tomorrow, this is right around 12 p.m. It looks like a lot of the cloud cover is falling apart, and that's going to result in a quicker warm up the more sunshine that we do see. So finally, maybe some slightly warmer temperatures for Thursday afternoon. It's really all going to be dependent on the cloud cover that we do see. And then we try to have some backside moisture. I mentioned that low pressure center just to the north of us, so that counterclockwise rotation will be sending maybe a bit of moisture that tries to linger in the form of scattered cloud cover, a few sprinkles throughout Thursday afternoon. But going into Thursday evening and into the nighttime hours, all of that cloud cover finally breaks apart and we transition into Halloween morning. 7 a.m. on Friday. Crystal clear, maybe a bit of a light breeze, and Frankenstein is dancing, not only because, yes, it is going to finally be a crystal clear start to a work day here in central Georgia, but he's also dancing because he's probably trying to keep himself warm. Your morning low temperatures on Friday, they are going to be mighty chilly. But the flip side of that is nothing in the way of cloud cover blocking your sunshine. Friday should be a pleasantly warm afternoon, especially compared to what we've had Monday, Tuesday, and once again for your Wednesday afternoon. And then as we transition all the way to the end of Future View, still looks crystal clear and you're looking good to go for any outdoor plans. You have Halloween night, and as we transition into very early on Saturday morning, maybe you're keeping the party going until 4 a.m. on Saturday. Nothing to worry about except for some chilly temperatures during those overnight hours. But first things first, let's talk about how much more rain that we're expecting. We've seen some totals maybe up to about an inch or two in a select few areas. That's kind of right here in this circle in the smack dab middle of central Georgia. So areas of Houston County, Peach, Crawford, and especially Bibb County have gotten some locally heavy totals, maybe upwards to around an inch or two. Almost all of central Georgia has fallen below the 1 inch mark for how much rain we've received over the last couple of days. So yes, it's definitely not a very substantial amount of rain to put a dent in our dry and drought conditions that have settled in, but we'll take any bit of rain that we can to maybe at least prevent the dry conditions or the drought conditions from worsening, which I don't expect them to do as we get a new update that will come out tomorrow. But the data from today's rainfall will not be taken into account with that update. They take the data as of every Tuesday, and then they release the data 2 days after that on Thursday mornings. So we'll be on the lookout for that. But first things first, only about another inch, or not even an inch, excuse me, a tenth of an inch, or maybe even upwards to about a quarter of an inch of rainfall could be expected, pretty widespread. And that graphic has remained pretty consistent over the last couple of days. So we will start to see that yellow build in as we go into the afternoon window when the front begins its passage through central Georgia, gusts up to 25 miles per hour possible. Then going into Thursday morning, still a bit of a steady breeze coming out of the west. So I mentioned after that front passes, that's when we're going to start to see those winds shift direction. So they're going to start to come out of the west as opposed to the south and the southeast, which they're doing right now. Thursday afternoon, this is going to be the breeziest day that we have over your short-term forecast. Gusts not only up to 25 miles per hour, but widespread yellow and widespread maybe some areas of red and orange. So that's going to indicate the potential for some gusts up to 30 miles per hour. It is going to be a gusty afternoon on Thursday. You're going to want to plan accordingly. Grab the windbreaker, and obviously a bit of a bad hair day for many people. So obviously going to feel a little bit chillier, especially with some cool temperatures that we still have in the forecast. You'll want to make note of that before heading out the door tomorrow. Now we go into Friday morning. Still a bit of a steady breeze, but a downtick in the winds from Thursday afternoon into Friday morning. And we're still holding on to a steady breeze right around 4 p.m. as you're getting off of work, starting to get the kids ready, head out trick-or-treating. But take a look at what happens as we head into the nighttime hours. That breeze starts to finally fall apart, so I don't think you should expect some gusty winds whatsoever for your Halloween evening and your Halloween night activities. Now let's take a look at the next 3 days as a whole. 63 for a high temperature today. I mentioned that's kind of that middle ground high temperature. Some areas a little bit warmer, some areas that don't get out of the 50s later on today. As we get the clearing behind the frontal boundary, yes, I know we're still keeping some clouds in the forecast, but it will allow for some more clear skies, and that's going to allow for the morning low temperatures to go down into the lower 40s tomorrow morning. So it's going to be a chilly environment as you walk out the door on Thursday morning. High temperature of 61 tomorrow afternoon. That's still pretty dependent on how much cloud cover remains in the forecast, and that passes through on the backside of that center of low pressure. 10% chance of a sprinkle just to cover the bases. It's very likely that you dodge anything in the way of rain as we go throughout tomorrow. And then the chilliest of the next couple of days are going to be Friday morning and Saturday morning. 38 degrees as you walk out the door on Halloween morning. Spookily cool, I might add. 67 for a high temperature though. So your morning lows are going to decrease with the lack of cloud cover, but your afternoon highs are going to do the opposite. They're finally going to increase as we see that steady warm up and we try to make the rebound back closer to average. But 67 degrees is definitely still on the cooler side. In fact, 8 degrees below average for this time of year. I guess I kind of messed up the order of my graphics, but I did just want to show you what I was referring to earlier. We'll see some faint areas of light green right ahead of that frontal boundary as it makes its way through. This is 5 p.m. right now here in central Georgia. And then after the front moves past us, it starts to usher in that drier air along with some cooler air. And we are going to continue to see very low moisture, or little to no moisture really, over the course of Thursday, Friday, and all the way into early Saturday morning. So you do see this reciprocated on your Muggy meter. We see the downtick in the moisture content day by day as we head into Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, where low humidity does remain in the forecast. But then we turn our attention to the beginning of the work week next week. It looks like we do see a brief rebound in the humidity up into Monday. Stop me if you've heard that before, because yes, this is exactly what we were talking about at this time last week, with some rain chances maybe around later Sunday into the beginning of the work week next week. So let's see what the long range models have to say about it. Maybe some passing cloud cover, a frontal boundary that does try to maybe get close to us in our neck of the woods. However, there's just not a lot of moisture to work with, so that's why we don't see too many rain chances. It does look like some form of a low pressure center may try to establish itself along this frontal boundary, and as it encounters that warm water in the northern Gulf, it could try to get some form of organization. Nothing necessarily in the form of tropical characteristics, because this low pressure center would form over land. It would just kind of pass more of a conducive environment for development and more widespread rain chances. But according to the European model, we could see rain chances back in the forecast as early as later Sunday afternoon, but the GFS is definitely not on board with that. In fact, the trend you will notice with this is the Euro says widespread rain. The GFS says all the rain is going to dodge us predominantly over the course of Monday morning into Monday evening. Still widespread rain according to the blue, but according to the green, all that rain remains to the south of us or down to the southwest of us. Then we go into Tuesday morning, still holding on to our fair share of cloud cover, rain chances in the near vicinity. Going into Tuesday afternoon, still plenty of moisture down to the south of us, but it doesn't look like rain chances are set in stone here in central Georgia. So we're going to have to continue to see some agreement amongst these long-range models as we head into the beginning of next week. But I do think once we get around to Wednesday, that's when we begin to see the signs of clearing out once again as we transition into the end of the work week next week, which will be November 5th, 6th, and 7th. So yes, we are already getting into those first couple days in November next week. Very hard to believe. But something that will be happening that you are definitely going to want to pay attention to as we go into this weekend is daylight saving time will be ending. So what this means is we are going to fall back at 2 a.m. Eastern. Our clocks are going to turn back 1 hour automatically with all those Apple devices and the technology these days. But some of those manual clocks you are going to have to change on your own. So you're going to wake up on Sunday morning and you're going to see the time. Maybe it's 9:30 in the morning. Well, it's actually going to be 8:30 in the morning. So you can go ahead and hit the hay for an extra 45 minutes before you have to get up and at 'em on Sunday morning. But that official change happening at 1:59 a.m. right before 2 a.m., which means your digital clocks, the ones that change automatically, they're going to be at 1:59. And if you want to stay up halfway through the night and watch a cool phenomenon happen, they're actually not going to go to 2 a.m. They're going to go all the way back to 1 a.m. So this is our fallback portion of the time change that we have. This happens in the second half of the year, marks the end of daylight saving time. So we're sacrificing our later sunsets for an extra hour of sleep. And you may say, Alex, the sunsets are already very early. What does this mean? Well, they're going to get even earlier. So we're very likely looking at the dusk time frame to start as you're making your way home from work and after school activities. This is when the sunset is going to be on Sunday evening. 5:42 p.m., 10 hours and 49 minutes of daylight, and that continues to get worse and worse. How about December 1st, going to mark our earliest sunset that we see at 5:27. But the other side of it is your sunrise is going to go back before 7 a.m., so if you do tune into the morning show, we haven't really gotten a good glimpse of the sunrise, well, let alone because of the cloud cover over the last 3 days. But we will start to get images of that first light in the sky right in the 6 a.m. hour once again. But of course, that sunrise will get later and later. Sunset continues to get earlier and earlier until we get into December. Early in December, the sunset will actually continue to get later and later, but the sunrise will continue to get a little bit later. On December 21st, 7:33 a.m. is when the sun is going to rise, and your sunset a little bit later than 5:27, 5:32 in the afternoon, marking just under 10 hours of daylight. So December 21st is an important day because it will mark the shortest day in terms of hours of daylight, but it also is the first day of winter. The winter solstice is marked by that shortest day of the calendar year in terms of hours of daylight. So we'll continue to be on the lookout for that and continue to mark your calendars and know that time change is going to happen very soon. Now let's check in on some tropics. Hurricane Melissa, a hot topic over the last couple of days. Hurricane Melissa has now made 2 landfalls over the last 48 hours. It made landfall in western Jamaica as a humongous storm, a very strong storm and a record-breaking storm over in western Jamaica yesterday afternoon. Very early this morning, it made landfall in the southern portion of Cuba. And where it stands right now, as of this 11 a.m. advisory on Wednesday morning, 100-mile-per-hour winds. It sits as a Category 2 hurricane still. But the good news is we have continued to see a steady weakening trend with this, as Melissa has interacted with the mountainous terrain of Jamaica and the mountainous terrain now of southern Cuba. So pressure up to 974 millibars, but it's actually moving at a much quicker pace than it has over the last week. Melissa has been moving at a very slow speed in the central Caribbean and as it's made its way to Jamaica and southern Cuba, but now moving up to the northeast at 14 miles per hour. So this is getting into maybe about 7 times the speed it was about 5 to 7 days ago. I do remember some updates we were talking about it moving at a mere 2 miles per hour. So what Melissa is going to continue to do, it will impact areas of the southeastern Bahamas and Turks and Caicos as a Category 2 storm, but as it continues to move out into open water in the Atlantic Ocean, no real strengthening trend seen with Melissa, but it does look like it's going to get very close to Bermuda right here, where you can see the label as a low-end Category 2 or a high-end Category 1 hurricane, and then it will continue to move out up into the North Atlantic, well away from the United States. The only impacts we'll see in the United States should just be some increased rip currents and maybe some high surf in the southern component of Florida, close to the northern Bahamas. So let's talk about the first landfall that happened in West Jamaica yesterday afternoon near 1 p.m. near New Hope, Jamaica. If any of you are familiar with the geography, this is right there around that Black River area, which many weather services were talking about a whole lot yesterday. There were some pretty devastating impacts in Black River. 185 mile per hour winds and a pressure of 892 millibars. This is one of the strongest hurricanes in history in the Atlantic Basin to make a landfall. Now, we have seen pressures lower than this. We have seen wind speeds higher than that, but it's very unlikely for a storm this strong to make landfall. Typically, we have seen a weakening trend with a lot of them. Milton's winds actually got higher than that as of last year, but it didn't make landfall that strong. It made landfall as a Category 3. So this was a very strong storm when it made landfall in Jamaica. And Jamaica is a fairly small island, so you may think, okay, it just went right back over water. Well, here's a good indication. I have the wrong icon over here, but you can see there's not too much ocean in between Cuba and Jamaica. However, we didn't see another strengthening trend. Melissa made its second landfall near 3 a.m. on Wednesday morning, still as a major hurricane with 120-mile-per-hour winds and a minimum pressure of 952 millibars. So we did see a pretty good weakening trend before it hit Cuba. Obviously, still some pretty devastating impacts down there, but we're very thankful to see that weakening trend, and it just shows you what the mountainous terrain did do with that. So your watches and warnings, we still see plenty of hurricane warnings in the Bahamas. We do see some tropical storm warnings still lingering in Haiti and Turks and Caicos, and of course still that hurricane warning down in Cuba. But we also do see another watch, a hurricane watch, which has now been upgraded to a hurricane warning in Bermuda. So we are expecting impacts in Bermuda within the next 36 to 48 hours as Melissa will continue up to the north and the northeast. Quickly running through this because I'm already over our time for our stream, but 13 named storms so far this year. 5 hurricanes, Melissa made that 5, and Melissa also made this number 4 major hurricanes, 3 of which have reached Category 5 status. So yes, a very active hurricane season in terms of some strong hurricanes. However, we're not quite hitting the numbers that Colorado State forecasted, with the exception of that major hurricane category where we are matching what Colorado State forecasted. Now let's take a quick look at your eventful 7-day forecast. Still in the 60s day by day until we finally get to Sunday, popping back up to the 70s. More rain chances around the end of the weekend into the beginning of next week. We'll keep an eye out what that election day forecast is looking like as we head into next Tuesday, but it's best to toss the raincoat away after we get through tomorrow evening. We'll need it Friday and Saturday, but you very well could need it for Sunday evening, especially into the beginning of the work week on next Monday. But Halloween, new month starting, cocktail party, time change, and election day. We have a whole lot to talk about. You'll want to tune in for the extended forecast as we go into tomorrow at 11 a.m. and especially Friday, where we're doing a weekend preview for all the events that you need to know. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow.